Did God create us, or did we create God? Is God real, or is God an idea that people came up with to explain the unexplainable? The question we're going to talk about in this video is, does God exist? If so, can we prove it? Now, one thing we need to keep in mind is the difference between proof and persuasion. To prove something is to demonstrate the truth or existence of something by evidence or argument. To persuade is to cause someone to believe something. So, can we prove the existence of God? Yes, we can prove the existence of God by logic and science. Whether someone can be persuaded of this is a different issue. There are many different approaches people have taken to show that there's a God. One of the oldest, and in my opinion, one of the best, is what philosophers call the cosmological argument. That's a big word, but really all it means is that you can't get something out of nothing. Here's how it shakes out. If anything exists now, something must have always existed, because nothing can create itself. Take this marker I'm holding in my hand. If this marker is real, if it exists, it came from somewhere. And it didn't make itself, and it's not eternal, which means without beginning or end. It was probably made in a factory somewhere. So we can trace the marker's origins, or where it came from, back to the factory. But the factory didn't make itself, and it's not eternal. It was probably built by workers. So we can trace the factory's origins back to the workers. But the workers didn't make themselves, and they're not eternal. The workers came from their parents. So we can trace the workers' origins back to their parents. From there, we can trace the workers' parents back to their parents, and so on. And if you keep on going back, eventually you must have a first cause. That first cause, the one who got the ball rolling for everything, is what or who we call God. Now, God doesn't have a cause because He's eternal and self-existent. That means He has no beginning and doesn't need anything outside Himself for life. There's another way to look at it. If anything exists, or if anything is real, you have three options of how it's here. Number one, the universe was created by God. Number two, the universe created itself. And number three, the universe is eternal without beginning or end. Now, the first one on this list that we can eliminate is number two. We know for a logical and absolute certainty that nothing can create itself. This violates the law of non-contradiction. That law states that something can't be true and not true at the same time in the same relationship. In our example, you can't be and not be at the same time. For something to create itself, it would need to exist before it existed. This is called a formal absurdity. We would call it nonsense or gibberish. Number three on our list is the universe is eternal and self-existent. Now, there's nothing wrong with this from a logical standpoint, but the problem here is there's not a single piece of scientific data that would support this position. In fact, the opposite is true. Modern science has discovered that the universe had a beginning and it will have an end. It has also been shown that time had a beginning and it will also have an end. This eliminates number three on our list. Now that leaves number one, an eternal self-existent God created all things. So, does God exist? Yes. And can we prove it? Yes. Both logic and science prove that God exists. So where do most of the critics of the existence of God fall out on our list? Well, number one is not an option, and number three is not supported by science. So, you guessed it, number two. The rabbit out of the hat without a rabbit or a hat. Some of the most brilliant scientists in our day are arguing something came from nothing. You can check it out for yourself. Some of them use sophisticated language to explain it, like they talk about spontaneous generation. That's technical language for something came from nothing. Don't ever let anyone tell you something came from nothing. That's nonsense, no matter how many PhDs you have. But what about the Big Bang? Are science and religion opposed to each other? We'll talk about these issues and other common questions of the Christian faith in upcoming videos. So don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell if you want updates on our posts.